Hey, thank you for watching. Just to start with a quick overview, at age 51, back in late April, I completed my first 100-mile endurance run in less than 29 hours. Relatively slow, nothing to really be impressed by because almost anybody can learn how to do this. About 4.5 years before doing the 100 miles, I was just learning some barefoot running, minimalist running techniques. 6 years ago was a first marathon where I kind of hobbled in on one leg. It was rather slow and painful. And about 3.5 years before this, I had started a 100% plant-based diet. Sometimes the learning curve seemed like a long and wide, winding road, but in reality, it was pretty quick. From that first marathon to being able to do 100 miles, considering my age and just how much rehab and conditioning and technique improvement needed to happen. Okay, tip number 1, be happy at the back of the pack. There's no point in being overly competitive, worrying too much about speed and time for a first 100-miler. I was looking for the easiest course I could find with the best weather to suit my running skills. Any 100-miler you find is going to have a time limit, so don't be afraid to use most of that time. 100 miles is a long way, even on a relatively smooth course without a lot of high altitude or elevation changes. How does running for almost 29 hours feel? Actually, a lot easier than I expected. Running through the night's really a pleasure. 6 years ago, upon finishing a first marathon, I'm not even sure if I was aware that people could run 100 miles. Certainly never would have thought I could do it. In middle school and high school, many decades ago, I did absolutely zero sports. Sort of had maybe a sports inferiority complex, which is probably at least as damaging as having an overconfidence or a superiority complex. Most of the runners you'll find at the back of the pack are fun-loving, great people. Just relax and enjoy them. Tip number 2, learn to heal yourself. Be very cautious about the well-meaning general public, friends, family, neighbors, and medical professionals. Most of them don't know anything about running 100 miles and really are pretty clueless in general about what people are capable of and what is actually good for us. For several years now, I've completely avoided orthopedists, chiropractors, various forms of therapists. Self-trained and injury-free is the affordable and efficient way to learn how to run 100 miles. Now, obviously, sometimes you have to go see the doctor, but what I'm trying to say is that medical people are business people. There's salesmanship and profit involved. Patients are also customers, so just be careful to not let them teach you that you're broken and only they can fix you. That's not necessarily true. Our bodies are generally self-healing under the right conditions, and my experience has been that very rarely will a doctor teach you how to create the right conditions. Learn what most doctors do not know. Great running technique and excellent nutrition can negate the need for most medical interference. The idea being, of course, to root out the real causes of symptoms and fix those instead of spinning your wheels, spending a lot of time and money treating symptoms. Tip number 3, know exactly why you want to run 100 miles. I had many reasons. Endurance running is a great form of multitasking. Mind, body, spirit, everything at once. You're doing it all. Now, most people either don't run, and many runners don't run far enough to really punch through the discomforts and get to where you can experience a long-running natural runner's high. So anyways, know what your missions are and be committed to that. Tip number 4, it's a head game and a heart game. Our thoughts are vital, they're key, but our emotions, our heart, are like an amplifier. Endurance runners actually build a stronger, larger heart. Hopefully that will actually help build even more power into the emotions behind the thoughts. In some ways, this aspect of running a 100-miler is the most exciting part. What I'm talking about is using quantum physics and the ancient principles of karma. Whether or not you believe these things or not, they're happening right now. It's always happening. Said simply, we become what we think and feel about. The law of attraction states like attracts like. Simple physics, but at the level of thought and emotion. If you want to run 100 miles badly enough, you'll simply attract the energy, wisdom, and circumstances to make it happen. Stay focused with positive emotions on what you want, and avoid thinking about what you do not want. If you're very focused on not getting injured, and you keep thinking about that, odds are pretty high you're going to end up being injured. Tip number 5, visualize success. Feel it as if you're actually doing it. Olympic athletes can sit idly, go through their routine in their mind, and throughout their body, the impulses can be measured. So imagine arriving at your first 100-miler. The trip goes smoothly. Every piece of gear, all your supplies are right where they need to be. You're going to run smooth. You're going to execute your plan. You're going to imagine the finish line and the recognition you're going to get. You're going to feel the tangible award going into your hand at the finish line. You're going to physically and mentally feel great. Initially, during my run, I thought it would be fun to kick off my footwear and run the final couple hundred feet barefoot into the crowd, small crowd. And when I realized how badly my feet hurt at about 98 miles, I decided to do some push-ups on the finish line instead. And that felt wonderful. It was a nice stretch, and then the buckle fell into my hand exactly as I'd been feeling it all along. So it was a very successful visualization. Feel the success before it happens to help make it happen. Tip number 6, get to know yourself much better. You're going to have to work to eliminate your weaknesses and build your strengths simultaneously. 6 years ago, I was overweight, had broken down ankles, and in 2004, I had thyroid cancer. So I was going through a lot of turmoil and was really sadly out of shape. Now, I guess I could do a full-length documentary on this subject. Rather, I'll try to keep it brief, and in the video description below, I'll include many links to my past videos, etc., that get into more detail as to how you can recondition yourself, strengthen yourself. Ideally, the first step in this whole process is to eliminate pain and muscle imbalances throughout your body. So for this, I'd recommend that you get a copy of Pete Egoscue's book, Pain Free, and use it, learn it, live it. It's a great investment of your time. And then, or simultaneously, pick up Danny Dreyer's book, Chi Running, that's C-H-I Running, and learn that. Take multiple readings, practice it as long as it takes to really feel it working. And after that, I got Ken Bob Saxton's Barefoot Running book to sort of fine-tune that, and it worked extremely well. Through this process, you really should gain a much deeper understanding of yourself, and really what it is to be human, to experience joy, feeling good every day. Tip number 7, use humor, a laugh as much as you can. Trying to push way beyond your previous longest distances can be both exciting and very scary. So, maybe before you go to your event, watch your favorite comedies again. I happened to find an old Jeff Foxworthy CD before I left and listened to that on the long drive, and boy, it sure helped. Smiling often and laughing helps you maintain a positive sense of curiosity. That's important when you're trying to run 100 miles and blow way through any barriers you thought you might have had. So remember to try and gather energy from every person that you might see out there during your 100 miles, even the animals you might come across. Remember, running is fun, life should be fun, just feel good. Tip number 8, it's about the food, specifically plant power. In the book Born to Run, Coach Joe Vigil offered up a lot of great advice, including eat like you are third world poor. And by that he did not mean McDonald's, he meant rice and beans, whole foods, real simple plant-based foods. Coach Joe also said seek wisdom over wealth. Great advice. And Scott Jurek had it figured out a long time ago. Of course, he's one of the greatest ultra runners ever, and he knew that there were 2 types of food. Basically, there's plant-based foods that nourish us ideally and help heal us, perfect for recovery, and then there's animal-based foods that all have weaknesses you do not need in your life. So animal-based foods all promote chronic diseases, especially when overconsumed. So just simply avoid meat, eggs, and dairy, which I've eliminated 100% for going on 4 years now. Simply integrate whole plant-based foods, preferably organics, and eliminate all meat, eggs, dairy, and over-processed foods. On a 100% plant-strong diet, it's still easy to take in too many calories and pack on extra weight. I've noticed that my cholesterol level goes up even on a cholesterol-free diet if I start putting on weight. So know your BMI range, figure out where you're comfortable within that range, and just limit the quantity of your food. Part 2 on this subject is fine-tuning a plant-strong diet to fuel you through 100 miles. More than likely you're going to do quite a few ultras on your way to the 100-mile distance, so you can experiment. What's worked for me is to limit calories in the days leading up to an ultra. So I'm starting the race at a relatively light weight, not too much volume in the stomach. During those days, it tends to be a lower fiber, lower fat content diet, and then on the day of, 3 hours before the start should be your final decent-sized meal, and you'll figure out what works for you. Again, it's lower fiber, lower fat for me, and coffee is your friend. It's also important to remember that for a 20 to 30 hour event, roughly, you're going to be running a deficit. You're going to probably be burning up 400 to 600 calories per hour, but during heavy strenuous exercise, you're really only going to be able to process about 200 calories per hour. So make them count. High quality whole plant-based foods are ideal, and I've done several videos on that. I'll include the links below. Number 9, very important, take great care of your feet. You might be touching the ground more than 250,000 times during a 100-mile event, and it's really important to keep a high cadence, a pretty quick turnover, 180 foot taps per minute total, and knees bent at all times. Run light, pick up your feet, don't shuffle, don't push off the ground, pick up those feet, work from your core. So no shuffling, no kicking rocks, and try to get out there with the very least amount of foot protection that you can get by with, given the course you're on. For most ultras, I prefer to wear kind of a Huarache sandals. But regardless of what you wear, you want to have the widest shoe that'll work for you. Your feet will swell. After about a marathon or whatever, your feet are going to swell. So some basic tips for your feet: apply Body Glide and or something like Burt's Bees hand salve to your feet. Wear toe socks to also help eliminate blistering, and to keep your shoelaces extra loose if you're wearing shoes. I've found that it helps greatly to stretch the feet in all different directions throughout the 100 miles. Stop and occasionally massage them at aid stations. Anything you can do to maximize blood flow into your feet and relieve any swelling. Constantly monitor your lower extremities, especially your feet. Carry some medical tape along in case you need to cover a blister. Get in the habit of shaking your bare feet out and really body sensing everything that's happened to give you a baseline, and keep, do that during 100 miles just to see how your feet really are doing. At the 100 miler I did, it kind of made me sad to see how many people were dropping out because of blisters and foot pain. That's pretty preventable stuff. Tip number 10, review what you've learned. Before I even got to the finish line, I was already thinking about signing up for the same event the following year. And when you run for 29 hours, you have a lot of time to think about all the things you did to get you there, what worked, maybe what didn't. Now, luckily for me, virtually everything I was doing worked. Finally got my nutrition right. I did not have a single blister, no cramps. I never truly hit a wall. I never seriously thought about dropping out. During the final few miles, definitely felt like this just needs to be over. Every step hurt in the balls of both feet. But all in all, I basically experienced the most hours of consecutive runner's high ever. And luckily at the event I was in after sundown on day one, every aid station had coffee. So with all the endorphins kicked in, little dehydration problem fixed, optimism after 50 miles into it, kind of on the downhill slide, I was just giddy out there. There were actually volunteers that were wondering if I was truly completely sober. I hope to go back and repeat the same 100 miler in 2015. One thing I learned was that I need to power walk sooner at the end. I could power walk faster than I could walk/run. And I think I can go back and run the entire thing in Huarache sandals next year. Years ago, some people described a full Ironman triathlon as the poor man's Everest. Well, doing an Ironman sure has gotten expensive since then, and lots more people have done it. It's a great thing. I kind of laid out my own full Ironman course and just did it myself, and kind of scratched that itch. And anyway, running 100 miles seems to be catching on like Ironman did a couple decades ago. Although it takes about twice as long to do a 100-mile run. And it costs a fraction of a typical Ironman. So anyways, that's another reason to consider it. Okay, for a final recap of the top 10 tips. Number 1, be happy in the back of the pack. 2, heal thyself. 3, know why you are on this mission. 4, it's a head game and a heart game. 5, visualize it. Feel it's done before you start. 6, know yourself and humanity better. 7, laugh. Life is fun. Feel good every day. 8, plant-based foods are it. Period. 9, love your feet. 10, review what you've learned, set new goals. And finally, everything is energy. You are an energy field within a giant energy field. The universe is an energy field. So, and everything's connected, not just humans. When you respect that, you can transform yourself and beyond. So, go run 100 miles and feel good. If you've ever crapped in the woods 20 times in 20 hours at triple your resting heart rate, you might be a redneck ultra runner.